The Texas justice system is messy, so let's break it down. You're listening to So You Got Arrested, the podcast that tells you what really happens after an arrest. Hosted by BRIC criminal defense attorneys, we talk to the people who've lived it, worked in it, and been shaped by it. Whether you're facing charges or just want to understand your rights, your options, and the smart moves that could change everything, we've got your back.
Welcome to So You Got Arrested. This is a BRIC criminal defense podcast. So we've been doing a series lately where we've been interviewing candidates for the district attorney's race and some of our local judges. We're very fortunate to have Meli Carrión Powers with us today. She's a candidate for Bexar County District Attorney. Welcome to the podcast, Meli.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Jacob Lindberg, who's jumping in as our co-host today.
Local BRIC.
Local BRIC. Meli, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Port Lavaca, Texas. You know where that is?
It's near Corpus. Am I
That's the
wrong?
Sandcrabs. No?
How did you know that? It is the Sandcrabs. Port Lavaca, Texas, a teeny tiny little town. I don't think the population's changed that much. It's about 10,000 residents in a small town halfway between Corpus and Houston.
Okay.
So it's on the Gulf Coast. So most people that have heard of it, a lot of people haven't. I'm surprised you knew that. But if most people that have heard of it know about it because of fishing.
Oh, okay.
So they go fishing off of, Port O'Connor or that area. So my parents were not from there. They came from the Corpus area, but my parents were educators. So they were teachers and then principals. So I was raised by principals. And that's where they taught school in the county. Both of them were elementary school principals.
Now, were they principals at your school?
No.
Thank goodness.
But what was I still have stories though, because by the time they became principals, I was in high school. So when I was younger, they were still teachers, and my mom was a PE teacher, and I don't remember what my dad taught, but they were teachers. And then as I got older, they became principals. And just real quick, there was this one time that I was at high school, different school. Mm-hmm. And there was some drama happening at the school that just drama. And I came home after school and I walked into the house and my mom said, "You need to come sit down at the table." And I was like, "Okay." And it was an incident where I want to say I stood up for somebody who was being wronged. And so it sort of created.
So you were an advocate back then.
I was, and I remember it very clearly. But she came and she told me to sit down, and I sat down, and she said, she was like, "It's my understanding that this incident happened," and she explained it. And I was like, "How do you know this? How did she know when I hadn't even come home to tell her?" But the teachers all call each other, right? So she knew. She really, I didn't do anything wrong. I was on the side of right, but she wanted to know that I was okay. She wanted to know that I wasn't, upset, that we had all this conflict that was going on had resolved. And I said, "Yes, it's fine." But one of the teachers was concerned and called my mom and said, "Hey, can you check on Meli?"
And this is in the days before text messaging.
Yes.
This teacher had to walk over to a
put it together in my mind. Yeah.
You don't know that.
The teacher made the effort, probably had a rotary dial where they had to wait for
With your Rolodex,
This is the 90s, Jacob.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah.
So you're there. Now, what was the name of the high school? Was it
Calhoun High School?
Calhoun High School in Port Lavaca.
And then the mascot are Sandcrabs.
Okay. The only thing that I know about your high school experience, and I saw this on Facebook, was that you were a drum major. You were like the one led the band.
Oh,
yes,
really?
but people think sometimes a drum major is a drummer.
Right.
Like a percussionist, but it's not. The drum major is the leader of the band that does the conducting on the marching field.
Wow.
So the one that walks in with a funny hat, usually we didn't have hats though, and walks in and then leads and then goes and stands up on the podium.
Yeah, on the podium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of
yes,
that's tall.
yeah.
Yeah, and if you go to a cool school, it's the one that dances with the
we didn't dance.
With the good band music. It's the best.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I went to high school in Corpus Christi. I went to Flower Bluff for a couple of years, and so we played the Sandcrabs. Luckily, won every time. But also
everybody won every time.
Soccer. No, we beat them in soccer. It was the best. It was very competitive. Anyways, and I fished with my grandfather out that way, so it's
so it was
familiar enough.
But this was Jacob's chance to brag that his
No,
soccer team was really good.
Thing. That's right.
Sure. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a long time ago, but that's where I grew up. And then my parents stayed for a bit. My sister's older. So when I went to college, I stayed at the local, well, it's in the next town over in Victoria. I stayed there for a couple years and did just my basic stuff there. There's a story behind that, but I won't get into it. And then after 2 years at it's a junior college, if you will, I went to UT Austin. It's huge. So I went from small to huge.
That's a big change.
Yeah, it was a big. And then at UT Austin, as part of, I was a major in political science or government, and one of the classes that I took was campaign. I forget the title of it, but it was you work for a campaign. So I worked at the time. So before your time, Jacob, I worked for the campaign was Lieutenant Governor when Mr. Sharp. Oh my gosh. John Sharp ran against Rick Perry at the time for lieutenant governor. So this was 1998 or somewhere.
Rick Perry sounds familiar.
Rick Perry. Well, Rick Perry later. Rick Perry. What do you mean?
Yeah, he was on Dancing with the Stars. He was. Yep, you're joking, right? He was the governor of Texas.
Anyway.
Yes, I understand.
Okay. So John Sharp lost. We lost, right? He's a Democrat.
Jacob making me feel old.
I know. Right? Same, me too. But yeah, so then I got school credit for working on that campaign, and I was in the finance fundraising department. So that kind of stuck a bit. So that's why I went to law school. Was one
so
of
you
the
got
reasons.
you got interested in like public service, public interest, that kind of thing.
And everybody around that, the senators and people that are working for the ledge, I was just kind of like, okay, well, all of them are lawyers, so that sort of got that ball rolling, and then some among other things. But so yeah, then I went to St. Mary, came here for St. Mary's.
Okay.
So I went from Austin and then came here. My sister was living here at the time. She was going to get her master's, so I came here.
And so when you started law school, did you know that you would have an interest in like criminal law, or is that what you went to law school for? It sounds like maybe you went to law school to do more on the government side of things. Or
I fully when I started law school, I fully intended, I think my mindset was I was going to serve in some sort of public office capacity. But then once I ended up at the DA's office and as an intern, so I ended up going to the DA.
So this is during law school?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
While you're in law school, in olden times, they had a notebook where you flip through it to find your summer jobs and stuff, hard copy. And
did you send emails after that? Oh, okay, all right. Sorry.
Send a carrier pigeon.
Gotcha. How do you communicate with them? That's great.
I just messing with you. So so I see this ad, or for an internship, and you were supposed to be a second year student, but for whatever reason they let me interview anyway. It was at the very end of my first year, and they hired me as an intern. So was an intern so I would have been a felony intern for the criminal trial division, right?
Okay.
So they have a bunch of interns still.
Yeah.
I actually had a couple of friends that were interns in the family violence division, but I wasn't super familiar with it because I was in the criminal trial division.
Who was the district attorney at that time?
Susan Reed.
Okay.
Do you remember, you know that name?
Yes, I
Judge
that one. I know
Susan
that
Reed.
one.
You know
For
that
sure.
one?
Yeah.
And so was this a job that you took in the summer after your first year of law school?
It was, so I was right at the beginning of second year. By the time it was September.
Okay.
So September at the very start of second year, but I did the interview stuff in the summer. So second year in September is when I started working there. And then I just stayed.
Yeah, I'm taking it you had a positive experience while you were there.
I did. I learned a lot. It was very, I learned a lot. And so that was in law school, but I was also had some personal lived experiences happening while I was in law school. And so putting that together with where I was already working, then it just sort of catapulted like, okay, this is where I'm going to stay.
This is what I want to do.
This is what I'm going to do.
So by the time you finished law school, you knew, hey, I want to go be a prosecutor.
Yes. But after we were done, there were several of us in our classes together. We were done being interns, very different than now. There was one vacancy for a prosecutor.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
One vacancy,
Yeah.
and 3 of us interns
Are
applied.
applying, right.
So my dear friend Bridget Garza, myself, and Robbie Ward. I don't know if you know Robbie.
I'm familiar with Robert.
And so, if I'm correct, Robbie got the job. And so we were like, okay, what do we do now?
No openings.
No, it was just
Wow.
one opening. And Robbie, deserved. Robbie's a strong lawyer. She got the job. And so I actually started looking in surrounding counties, and I actually had applied and was offered a position in Comal. And so it was like the first day. I remember very clearly. I was driving to Comal County, and I got a call from the I don't remember what her name was at the time, the administrative attorney, who then called from Bexar County, who then called and said, hey, now we have another opening.
Wow.
But I was about to take this job in Comal County.
Right.
So I was like, what do I do? So I called my dad. I'm like, what do I do? And he said, you go and explain. You go and explain to them, and you ask for some grace. Of
course.
So I did, and to my recollection, everybody was very graceful about all of it. And I came back and I started working.
Well, you already knew everybody at the Bexar County DA's office.
I lived here too.
Right.
It was home. I don't remember who exactly I met with, but I do remember it not being, it was a very gracious moment on their part too. So then I came back. And then I started working in the misdemeanor world.
So when you started, you started as a misdemeanor prosecutor. What kind of cases were you doing?
Mostly DWI. And in olden times, Jacob, there were, most of our cases were on VHS tapes.
Right.
So you plug that into the
You push
VCR.
it into the VCR.
Okay. All right.
Press
Keep
play.
tracking.
Yeah. So most of our DWIs were on VHS tapes.
Wow.
If you didn't have a tape, you really didn't have any other evidence, right?